He received a photograph taken inside his apartment. In the picture, he was sleeping, and a dark figure stood behind him. The problem was that he lived alone, and the doors were locked. I woke to the soft vibration of my phone on the nightstand. The blue glow of the screen cut through the darkness of my bedroom, illuminating the ceiling with spectral light. 3 in the morning, that liminal hour when the world seems thinnest. A message from an unknown number. My thumb hovered over the notification, a strange hesitation gripping me. In my line of work as a private investigator, late-night messages rarely brought good news. But this wasn't my work phone. This was my personal number, known only to a handful of people. I tapped open, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a photograph of my bedroom. My bedroom, right now. In the image, I lay on my bed, blanket pulled up to my chest, clearly asleep. The timestamp in the corner read 2:57 a.m., just minutes ago. But it wasn't the invasion of privacy that made my blood run cold. It was what stood in the corner of the room, partially hidden in shadow, a tall, blurred figure, entirely black, watching me sleep. I jerked upright, pulse hammering in my ears. My eyes darted to the corner where the figure had been standing. Empty. The room was empty. I lunged for the light switch, flooding the room with harsh yellow light. My hand instinctively reached for the drawer where I kept my service weapon, a habit from my days on the force. The deadbolt on my apartment door was engaged. The windows were locked from the inside, their latches undisturbed. The fire escape outside my window showed no signs of use, the light dusting of snow from earlier that evening still pristine on the metal stairs. My hands trembled as I looked at the photo again. The figure was unmistakable, though its features were indistinct, almost deliberately blurred. Standing in the exact spot where now there was nothing but my old reading chair and a stack of case files. Sender, unknown. I dialed the number, watching the door as the phone rang. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then, a connection. Heavy breathing filled my ear, intimate and unsettling. Who is this? My voice cracked, betraying the fear I was trying to suppress. A pause, then a whisper, so close it felt like lips against my ear. You're finally awake. The line went dead. I paced the length of my apartment, checking closets, looking under furniture, examining air vents, all the while feeling eyes on my back. The rational part of my brain, the detective, knew I needed evidence. Facts. Logic. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter, the screen reflecting my own tense face as I opened it. 6 months ago, after a particularly threatening case involving a local politician, I'd installed a security system with motion-triggered cameras. They recorded continuously, uploading footage to cloud storage. I navigated to the security app, hands still unsteady, and pulled up the night's footage. There I was, sleeping peacefully, the room still and undisturbed. I scrolled through the timeline until I reached 2:57 a.m., the timestamp from the photo. On the video, I slept on, alone. No figure stood in the corner. Nothing moved except the gentle rise and fall of my chest under the blanket. Then, precisely at 2:57, the image flickered. Static rippled across the screen for 3 seconds before clearing. Just interference, perhaps, but the timing. I scrolled back, slowed the footage down, watched frame by frame. There, in the static, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it, something stood in the corner. Dark, faceless, its outline barely distinguishable from the interference. And it was looking directly at the camera. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room suddenly felt colder, the shadows deeper. My phone vibrated again. New message. Same unknown number. Now it's your turn. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. What did that mean? My turn for what? I called Detective Sarah Martinez, my former partner on the force. We'd worked homicide together for 5 years before I left to go private. If anyone would take this seriously, it would be her. Cole. Her voice was thick with sleep. It's 3 in the morning. Someone's been in my apartment, I said, skipping pleasantries. They took pictures of me sleeping and sent them to my phone. I heard rustling as she sat up. Are you sure it's not some kind of prank? That new case you're working, the Henderson divorce, doesn't the husband have a history of harassment? This isn't Henderson, I said. The doors are locked from the inside. Windows too. Nobody could have gotten in, taken this picture, and left without leaving a trace. Send me the photo, she said. I heard the professional tone creep into her voice, sleep giving way to the detective. I forwarded the message, then waited in silence. Jesus, she murmured after a moment. That's unsettling. Have you checked the metadata? Nothing useful, I replied, having already examined it. Stripped clean. Whoever sent this knows what they're doing. I'm coming over, she said. Don't touch anything else. And Cole. Stay on the phone with me until I get there. While I waited for Sarah, I kept the lights on and moved to the living room, away from the bedroom. The message kept playing in my mind, now it's your turn. My turn to what? To take a picture. To be watched. Or something worse. My eyes fell on the hallway mirror, visible from where I sat. Something about my reflection seemed wrong, though I couldn't place what. I slowly stood up, phone pressed to my ear as Sarah talked about possible explanations. Could be accessing your security system remotely. These cheap cameras are notoriously easy to, Cole. You still there? I approached the mirror, drawn by a strange certainty that something was different. My reflection looked normal, disheveled dark hair, stubbled jaw, the same gray t-shirt and sweatpants I'd gone to bed in. But as I turned my head slightly, I caught it, a shadow behind me that didn't match my movements. I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back to the mirror, my reflection was alone. Cole. Sarah's voice snapped me back. Talk to me. What's happening? I swallowed hard. Nothing. Thought I saw something, but it's nothing. I'm 5 minutes out, she said. Just stay calm. When Sarah arrived, she did a thorough sweep of my apartment. A decade in homicide had made her methodical, precise, and skeptical, qualities that made her an excellent detective. No signs of entry, she concluded, putting away the small flashlight she'd been using to examine my door frame. And the security footage is strange. She'd reviewed the video, frame by frame, on my laptop. The interference at exactly 2:57 a.m., the barely there figure in the static. It could be a software glitch, she offered, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe it. Or someone hacked your system. And the photo? I asked. She frowned. That's the part one can't explain. It's definitely your bedroom, definitely tonight. The angle suggests it was taken from about here. She pointed to a spot near my bedroom doorway. But with both of us checking, we found no cameras, no devices, nothing that shouldn't be here. So someone was in my apartment, took a picture of me sleeping, then vanished without a trace, only to send me the picture minutes later. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. That doesn't make any sense. Sarah's eyes met mine, concern evident. When was the last time you slept properly, Cole? This Henderson case has had you working too hard. I bristled. This isn't sleep deprivation, Sarah. This is real. She held up her hands. I believe you saw something. I'm just not convinced of what it means yet. She gestured to the photo on my phone. The figure could be a reflection, or a technical artifact. Digital photos do strange things sometimes. I knew she was trying to be rational, but her explanation felt hollow. Something was happening here that defied rational explanation. Look, she said, seeing my frustration, why don't you pack an overnight bag and come stay at my place? We can figure this out in the morning. I was about to agree when my phone vibrated again. We both froze. Another message. Same unknown number. He can see what you see. Ask yourself why you only noticed him now. Sarah read the message over my shoulder, her expression hardening. That's it. We're leaving. Now. As I packed a quick bag, Sarah made a few calls, arranging for a patrol car to watch my building. Whatever was happening, it was clearly escalating. We stepped into the hallway, Sarah leading the way, hand resting instinctively near her holster. The elevator was out of service, again, so we headed for the stairs. The stairwell was dimly lit, concrete steps echoing with our footsteps. 3 floors down, the emergency exit to the street. You know, Sarah said as we descended, this reminds me of that case last year. The watchman. Remember? I nodded. The watchman was what the press had dubbed a stalker who terrorized 5 women in the financial district. He'd send them photos taken inside their homes, always while they slept. We never caught him, the case went cold after the 5th victim moved away. But the watchman always left evidence, I pointed out. Scratches on locks, footprints, fibers. And he only targeted women living alone. Sarah shrugged. Just saying there are precedents for this kind of. A loud bang echoed from above, cutting her off. We both looked up the stairwell. Probably just someone taking out trash, Sarah said, but her hand moved to her weapon. We continued down, more quickly now. As we reached the 2nd floor landing, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. My phone vibrated in my pocket. With a sense of dread, I pulled it out. A new photo. This one showing Sarah and me, from above, standing in the stairwell. Right now. I showed Sarah, my hands shaking. She immediately drew her weapon, aiming up the stairwell. NYPD, she shouted, her voice reverberating off the concrete walls. Show yourself. Silence. She grabbed her radio with her free hand. This is Detective Martinez. I need backup at 1420 West 43rd, apartment building C, possible stalking in progress. We backed against the wall, Sarah's weapon trained upward, my eyes scanning every shadow. The photo had been taken from above us, someone was in the stairwell, watching. When I give the signal, Sarah whispered, run for the exit. I'll cover you. I nodded, adrenaline making my vision sharper, movements more precise. Now. I sprinted down the remaining flight of stairs, Sarah backing down behind me, weapon still raised. We burst through the emergency exit into the cold night air, startling an elderly man walking his dog. Sarah kept her weapon out until we reached her car, parked half a block away. Only when we were inside, doors locked, did she holster it. You saw the photo, I said, breathing hard. Someone was there. Right above us. Sarah nodded, her earlier skepticism gone. I've called for a sweep of the building. If someone's there, we'll find them. But even as she said it, I could see doubt in her eyes. How could someone take a photo from above us, send it instantly, yet remain completely invisible when we looked up? As we drove to her apartment, my phone vibrated once more. I almost didn't want to look, but I had to know. Another message, mirrors show what eyes can't see. Look again. I turned to share this with Sarah, but the words died in my throat. In her car's rearview mirror, I could see something in the back seat. A dark shape, blurred and indistinct, but unmistakably there. I whipped around. The back seat was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the shape was gone. Cole. Sarah had noticed my sudden movement. What is it? I stared at the now normal reflection in the mirror. Nothing, I said quietly. Just jumpy. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever this was, it wasn't over. The message echoed in my mind, "He can see what you see." If he had been behind me all this time, why had I only noticed him now? And more terrifying still, what did he want? Sarah's apartment was a stark contrast to my cluttered space, minimalist, organized, everything in its place. She'd been a neat freak for as long as I'd known her, a trait that extended to her investigative work. Methodical. Precise. "You take the guest room," she said, locking and bolting her door. "I'll make some calls, see if we can trace that number." I knew it was futile, whoever was doing this was too careful to use a traceable phone, but I appreciated her trying. The guest room was small but comfortable. No mirrors, I noticed with relief. Just a bed, a nightstand, and a small dresser. I set my phone on the nightstand, keeping it in sight. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark figure in the corner of my bedroom, watching me. Instead, I lay awake, listening to Sarah's muffled voice in the living room as she made calls. My mind raced through possibilities. A tech-savvy stalker with a grudge. Someone connected to one of my cases. But how had they gotten into my apartment without leaving a trace? And the figure in the static, what was that? The rational explanations felt increasingly inadequate against the growing sense that I was dealing with something beyond rational understanding. I must have dozed off eventually because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the window, and the smell of coffee filled the apartment. My phone showed no new messages, small mercies. Sarah sat at her kitchen island, laptop open, a case file spread beside it. She looked up as I entered, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as poorly as I had. "Good news and bad news," she said, pushing a mug of coffee toward me. "Good news, the building security cameras show no one entering or leaving your apartment last night except us. Bad news, that means we still have no explanation for those photos." I took the coffee gratefully. "What about the sweep?" "Clean," she said. "Nothing in the stairwell, nothing on the roof. Whoever took that photo of us is either a ghost or very, very good at disappearing." She hesitated. "There's something else." I ran the text of those messages through our database. The phrasing, "You're finally awake and now it's your turn," matches messages received by 2 of the watchman's victims. I set my mug down. That case is a year old. And the watchman targeted female financial executives, not male PIs. "I know," she said. "But it's too similar to be coincidence. And there's another connection." She slid a folder toward me. "The Henderson divorce case you're working." Ethan Henderson worked for the same investment firm as the first 2 watchman victims. I opened the folder. Sarah had compiled a surprising amount of information in a short time. Ethan Henderson, Senior Portfolio Manager at Blackwell Finance. Messy divorce, accusations of infidelity. I'd been hired by his wife, Jessica, to gather evidence. "You think Henderson is the watchman?" I asked, skeptical. "He doesn't fit the profile." The watchman was methodical, patient. Henderson is volatile, impulsive. He trashed his own car when Jessica served him papers. Sarah shrugged. "People can surprise you. And it would explain why the pattern changed. This is personal for him, you're working for his wife." It made a certain kind of sense, but something felt off. The photos, the figure in the static, the message about mirrors, it all seemed more elaborate, more otherworldly than Henderson's blunt personality would suggest. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, closing her laptop. "The last message you got, about mirrors showing what eyes can't see. That's not from the Watchman case. But it is familiar." I raised an eyebrow. "From where?" "An old case from before your time. 1980s, detective named Harlan Moore claimed he was being followed by something he could only see in reflections. Started sending himself cryptic messages as reminders. Eventually had a breakdown, quit the force. The parallels made my skin crawl. What happened to him? Sarah's expression darkened. Found dead in his apartment. Official cause was heart failure, but... She trailed off. But what? According to the report, all the mirrors in his apartment had been covered. And they found a camera with its film exposed, deliberately ruined. We sat in silence, the implications hanging between us. Was I following in the footsteps of a detective who'd lost his mind 4 decades ago? Or was there something more sinister connecting these cases? My phone vibrated on the counter. We both stared at it, neither reaching for it immediately. Could be Henderson, Sarah offered weakly. We both knew it wasn't. I picked up the phone. A new message from the unknown number, but this time it wasn't text or a photo. It was an address. 456, Blackwell Street, basement level. Sarah looked it up immediately. It's an old record storage facility. Blackwell Finance uses it for physical document archiving. The connection to Henderson's employer seemed too convenient to be coincidence. Maybe Sarah's theory had merit after all. We should check it out, I said. Sarah hesitated. Cole, this could be exactly what they want, to lure us somewhere isolated. Or it could be a lead. Maybe we find evidence connecting Henderson to the Watchman case. After some debate, we agreed on a compromise. Sarah would call in the address as a potential location of interest in an ongoing investigation. We'd meet the responding officers there rather than going alone. As we prepared to leave, I caught my reflection in the decorative mirror by Sarah's door. For a split second, I thought I saw something behind me, a shadow that shouldn't be there, but when I turned, nothing was there. The record facility was in an industrial area of the city, the kind of neighborhood where even the graffiti looked tired and faded. The building itself was solid brick, built in the 1940s and barely maintained since. 2 patrol officers were already there when we arrived, a young man and woman who looked like they'd drawn the short straw for this assignment. Detective Martinez, the male officer, greeted Sarah. Building manager's on his way with the keys. Says no one should be inside, place has been locked up since Friday evening. We waited in tense silence, my eyes continually scanning our surroundings. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, that unshakable feeling of being watched returning stronger than ever. The building manager arrived 20 minutes later, a heavy-set man with a perpetual scowl. He unlocked the front entrance, leading us through a dusty reception area toward a service elevator. Basement's only accessible this way, he grumbled. Fire code violation, probably, but the building's grandfathered in. The elevator was a rickety cage-style contraption that groaned in protest as we descended. The basement, when we reached it, was exactly what you'd expect: concrete floors, flickering fluorescent lights, rows upon rows of metal shelving units filled with bankers' boxes and file folders. "What are we looking for?" one of the patrol officers asked. "Anything related to harassment cases, surveillance equipment, or files on these individuals." Sarah handed them a list that included the Watchman's known victims and, I noticed, my name. We split up to cover more ground, each taking a section of the massive room. The quiet was oppressive, broken only by the occasional shuffle of papers or footsteps on concrete. I moved through the dimly lit rows, scanning shelf labels. Most contained financial records, tax documents, transaction histories, investment portfolios. Nothing immediately suspicious. Until I rounded a corner and found myself in a section that made no sense. The boxes here were labeled with case numbers, police case numbers. I recognized the format from my time on the force. I pulled one down, opened it. Inside were copies of police reports, witness statements, and crime scene photos from the Watchman case. Someone had been collecting information on the investigation. "Sarah!" I called out. "Found something." As I waited for her, I continued examining the box's contents. There was a folder with my name on it, containing surveillance photos of me entering and leaving my apartment building, meeting with clients, even having dinner with Sarah 6 months ago. I'd been under observation for at least half a year. The realization sent ice through my veins. This wasn't random. This was calculated, meticulous, obsessive. Sarah appeared at the end of the row, her expression changing from curiosity to concern as she saw what I'd found. "Cole, what is this?" She leafed through the surveillance photos, her brow furrowing deeper with each image. "Someone's been watching me," I said, the words hollow in my ears. "4 months. And they've been collecting information on the Watchman case." Sarah picked up a notebook that had been beneath the photos, flipping it open. Inside were handwritten notes, the penmanship tight and controlled. "Subject shows no awareness," she read aloud. "Conventional methods ineffective. Moving to phase 2. This is..." She trailed off, looking up at me. "Cole, we need to get this to the lab. All of it." As she spoke, the fluorescent light above us flickered, then went out, plunging our section into shadow. The patrol officers called from somewhere in the distance, their voices echoing strangely in the cavernous space. "Power's out in Section C. Generator should kick in." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement's temperature. "Sarah," I said quietly, "we should go. Now." She nodded, gathering the files. As we turned to leave, my phone vibrated in my pocket. We both froze. I slowly withdrew the phone, already knowing what I'd see. A new message from the unknown number. "Behind the mirror. Always behind. Always watching. Do you see now?" The message made no sense, yet filled me with inexplicable dread. "Let's go," Sarah repeated, more urgently this time. We hurried back toward the elevator, finding the patrol officers already waiting there. The female officer was speaking rapidly into her radio, requesting backup. "Security alarm just triggered upstairs," she explained. "Someone else is in the building." "Did you see anyone?" Sarah demanded. Both officers shook their heads. "Just heard the alarm through the radio." The elevator seemed slower going up, the ancient machinery protesting with every foot of ascent. When we finally reached the main floor, the reception area was empty, exactly as we'd left it. "Stay here," the male officer said, drawing his weapon. "We'll clear the area." The 2 patrol officers moved toward the hallway that led deeper into the building, leaving Sarah and me by the elevator. "This doesn't make sense," Sarah murmured, clutching the file box. "Why lead us here just to trigger an alarm? Unless the alarm was a distraction. Or we'd found something we weren't supposed to find." My gaze fell on a decorative mirror hung on the wall opposite us, an odd luxury in such a utilitarian space. In its reflection, I could see Sarah and myself, the elevator behind us. And something else. A dark shape at the edge of the frame, just on the periphery of the reflection. I turned sharply, seeing nothing in the actual space. But in the mirror, the figure remained, barely visible yet unmistakably there. "Cole." Sarah had noticed my sudden movement. I pointed at the mirror without speaking. She looked, her eyes widening slightly. "What am I supposed to be seeing?" she asked. Could she not see it? The figure was clearer now, standing just behind us in the reflection, though in reality, there was only empty space. "There's something there," I said, my voice tight. "In the mirror. Behind us." Sarah looked again, more carefully this time. "I don't." She began, then stopped. "Wait. Is that a shadow?" So she could see it, but not clearly, not as I did. The shape in the mirror was becoming more distinct to me, less a blur and more a silhouette. A tall, thin figure in what appeared to be a long coat. "We need to go," I said, backing toward the door, keeping my eyes on the mirror. Right now. We moved quickly to the entrance, Sarah calling out to the patrol officers that we were leaving. No response came from the hallway they'd entered. Outside, the late afternoon sun was sinking toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the street. Sarah tried radioing the officers inside, received no answer, and immediately called for backup. "Something's wrong," she said, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. They should have responded. I couldn't focus on the missing officers. My mind was consumed by what I'd seen in the mirror, and by the messages. Behind the mirror. Always behind. "The file," I said suddenly. "What else is in there?" Sarah set the box on the hood of her car and we sifted through its contents. More surveillance photos, case notes on the watchman, and at the very bottom, a manila envelope labeled simply, "More." Inside were photocopies of reports from the 1980s case Sarah had mentioned, Detective Harlan Moore, who'd claimed to be followed by something visible only in reflections. One report caught my attention, an interview with Moore's partner 3 weeks before Moore's death. The partner described Moore becoming increasingly paranoid, insisting that it was getting closer, becoming clearer in reflections. Moore had told his partner that he'd started seeing it peripherally even without mirrors, that soon he would see it directly, and then. The partner's statement ended there, the rest of the page redacted with thick black lines. "Sarah," I said, my mouth dry, "what did Moore's partner say happened next?" She shook her head. "I don't know. That part wasn't in the file I saw." A cold numbness spread through me. Whatever had happened to Moore was happening to me. The figure in the reflections was becoming clearer, more present. Soon I would see it directly, and then. What? Sirens wailed in the distance, the backup Sarah had called. But I couldn't wait. I had to understand what was happening. "I need to go back to my apartment," I said. Sarah stared at me incredulously. "Are you insane? After everything that's happened?" "The answers are there," I insisted. "Whatever this is, it started in my apartment. And I think." I hesitated, aware of how irrational I sounded. "I think it's connected to my mirrors." "Cole, listen to yourself. I know how it sounds. But looking at these files, at what happened to Moore, it's the same pattern. First photographs, then messages, then sightings in reflections." Sarah's expression softened from disbelief to concern. "I can't let you go alone. You need to stay here, coordinate the search for those officers," I countered. "I'll be careful. I'll call you every 15 minutes. After heated debate, Sarah reluctantly agreed, but insisted on driving me back to my building herself before returning to the scene. As we drove, I studied Moore's file more carefully, looking for anything that might explain what was happening. Moore had been investigating a series of disappearances before his experiences began. The victims had all reported being watched, receiving photographs of themselves taken in their homes. Each had mentioned seeing figures in mirrors or reflective surfaces before they vanished. The police had dismissed it as mass hysteria, especially when no bodies were ever found. Moore had been the only detective to pursue it seriously, and had apparently become a victim himself. Back at my apartment building, I stood outside the main entrance, suddenly reluctant to go in. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said. "Stay at my place again. We'll figure this out together." I shook my head. "Whatever this is, it's not going to stop unless I face it." I tried to sound more confident than I felt. 15-minute check-ins. I promise. My apartment was exactly as we'd left it, untouched and undisturbed. I moved methodically through each room, examining every mirror and reflective surface, half expecting to see the dark figure waiting for me. Nothing. I returned to the living room and spread Moore's file across my coffee table. There had to be something I was missing, some connection between his case and mine. As the evening deepened into night, I pored over every detail, sending Sarah text updates as promised. The patrol officers had been found unharmed but confused, with no memory of what had happened after they'd separated from us. The building's security system showed no other entries or exits besides our own. Another dead end. I was about to give up when I noticed a pattern in the dates. Moore's experiences had begun exactly 40 years ago to the day. The first Watchman incident had occurred exactly 1 year ago to the day. And 100 years ago to the day, according to an old newspaper clipping in Moore's file, 3 people had disappeared from this very building, which had then been a hotel, all claiming to have been watched through mirrors. The pattern was too precise to be coincidence. My phone vibrated with a final message from the unknown number. Do you understand now? It's never been about you. You're just the one who can see. The one who can end it. Look in the mirror. Really look. Then decide. Drawn as if by compulsion, I moved to the hallway mirror. For a long moment, I saw only my own haggard reflection staring back, exhausted, afraid, but determined. Then, gradually, the figure appeared behind me. Clearer than ever before, no longer a shadow or blur but a distinctly human shape. A man in an old-fashioned coat, his face still obscured by what seemed like static, like visual interference. I didn't turn around. I knew there would be nothing there in the physical world. Instead, I forced myself to keep looking at the reflection, to focus on the figure. Slowly, the interference cleared. The face became visible, gaunt, hollow-eyed, with an expression of profound sadness. I recognized him instantly from the photographs. Detective Harlan Moore. Behind him stood others, faint, translucent figures. Men and women from different eras, all with the same lost expression. Moore's lips moved in the reflection, though no sound came. But somehow, I understood. They were trapped. Caught between reflections, neither fully here nor gone. Each had seen what I was seeing now, had been chosen as witnesses, as potential rescuers. Each had failed or fled. How? I whispered to the mirror. How do I end it? Moore raised his hand, pointing to my phone on the table behind me. As if on cue, it lit up with one final message. Break the pattern. Break the cycle. Break the... It ended there, unfinished. But I understood. I looked at Moore's reflection again, saw the pleading in his eyes. He nodded slowly. I had a choice. I could walk away, as others had before me. Live with the knowledge of what lurked behind reflections, always watching, always waiting. Or I could end it. But at what cost? I stood before the mirror, my decision unmade, the weight of a century of trapped souls hanging in the balance. Whatever choice lay before me would change everything, not just for me, but for all of them. And as I stood there, contemplating what to do, I asked myself one final question. If I had been watched all this time, seen but unseeing, what else might be lurking just beyond the edges of perception, waiting for someone to finally notice?